Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. In my journey of giving every Xbox release a review, certain games pop up that I would have never expected to touch before this channel. Shark Tale is one of those games, a children's movie-based game that most likely would not be up my alley. Yet my mission statement is that every game deserves a chance. I also feel that to understand the original Xbox's history, we have to look at the many movie games that were released for it. So let's take a look at Shark Tale and see if it rises above the movie game stigma. Today I'll give you some history, give you my feelings on the game, and its lasting impact. All footage was captured from an original Xbox, and I'd like to thank my YouTube channel members for their support. But let's go ahead and hop into the history of this one.
Oscar? Yeah, I know him. Just goes to show you that even a little fish can make a splash in a big pond under the right circumstances. In his case, he's lucky he didn't end up as an hors d'oeuvre at a shark banquet.
DreamWorks Animation has a long and exciting history in the film business, but I don't want to be too long-winded. I will say that they were on top of their game in the early 2000s. They had released a string of quality movies by 2001, but eventually everything changed with Shrek, which released in 2001 and became a critical smash hit and a hit at the box office. There was Shrek Fever, and that came with a ton of video games. Other DreamWorks games like Chicken Run and, surprisingly, Ants, which, don't get me wrong, I for whatever reason loved this movie when I was younger, but a racing game series on Ants is such a weird idea. In 2004, though, there was plenty of Shrek games, and Shrek 2 would come out that year, and would get even more games, as well as grossing almost $1 billion. In 2004, Shark Tale was another DreamWorks animation film, and it was set for release in October of that year. This was an anticipated animated movie, and the younger me was one of the ones excited for it. It had its announcement of development in 2002 as Shark Slayer, and was a little dampened by Pixar's Finding Nemo, which came out in 2003. It's another sea movie with talking fish, but Shark Tale is more of a parody on modern life than that one. With a new DreamWorks movie, a new game was obvious to pair with it. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information on the game's actual making, but it was first shown at E3 2004, and both IGN and GameSpot spoke well of it in its previews. Activision was publishing it, and Edge of Reality would be developing the home console version of the game. Until now, this team had only ported various games and created the newest Pitfall game. This team would release Shark Tale on September 29, 2004, just a day before the movie's full release on October 1st. As far as my personal history goes, I actually saw this movie at the drive-in in 2004, and I remember not liking it. Even younger me thought it was boring. I have not seen it again until this review, but I'll get into my opinions and general opinions of others in the lasting impact section of this video, since the game was released before the movie. I had never touched this game, this was my first time, and let me tell you how I felt about each part of it, starting with the plot. Since Shark Tale is based on a movie, it already has a well-established starting point. I do like that it doesn't go for the movie game pitfall of using clips from the movie and decides to have new cutscenes for the game. It also features a new voice cast, but does not change the movie's plot, except to shape some level design. You play as Oscar, a fish living paycheck to paycheck at the whale wash. Oscar takes the blame for a shark he didn't kill, and reaps the fame from all the fish because sharks are mobsters. The shark mob goes after Oscar, but a vegetarian shark named Lenny protects you and handles the issues that come with this. It's an odd choice for a children's plot, since it parodies hard R-rated mob flicks like The Godfather and Goodfellas, even featuring the voice of the director of Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese, in the movie's cast. I didn't get any of that as a kid, and let me tell you, I was bored by it. And now as an adult, I just find it kind of unfunny. Your enjoyment of the plot in the game will depend on your enjoyment of the movie's plot, but you also need knowledge of the movie plot to enjoy it properly. The way the cutscenes are laid out, they're really scattered and short with weak segues into the action. If you know the movie's plot, you can work it out, but without that, I can guarantee you will be confused by the segues and what is going on in the game. It feels cobbled together with essential characters like Lenny just popping up out of nowhere. There's enough of a through line to kind of get it, and seeing the movie helps, but still it feels like a jumbled mess. I don't think the original film is all that charming, but if you thought it was, I think a lot of that is lost in translation here. It's a game more focused on hitting the same major beats of the plot without piecing any of it properly together. The gameplay is where Shark Tale starts to do some interesting things in an attempt to keep it fresh. It comes off as more of a minigame collection with a mix of 2.5D side-scrolling, and some of it works. It's in a mission-based format where each level is a certain game type and you have to meet criteria to move on, like finding 70% of the money in the level or making it to the end in 3 minutes. There is money you earn, but it's really only used to unlock concept art and bonus material. First, the game starts with a dodging minigame which sees you move to different arrows on the side of the screen as something attacks you. These modes are fine and boils down to just quick time pressing. The timing as you get further in the game gets slimmer, but it's never quite challenging. It would be okay and maybe a bit tricky for a kid, but this will probably become tedious for anyone else. Though I didn't mind them, they are generally short, but I do really like the flip side of these levels. These see you fighting giant enemies as they come at you. It has you punching left, right, or doing an uppercut. You can also use super combos if you get a combo going. It's a simplistic version of Punch-Out, and I think it is a nice little addition to this game's lineup. You must time your punches and dodges based on their movements, and getting combos feels solid. I thought these levels were a good time, but really weren't that challenging. At least it did take some solid timing, and you had to think about your actions. This is a little spark in this game, and it does at least feel like the developers put stuff in to make this game feel a little fresh. Unfortunately, it goes stale when you take in the dancing sections of this game. This game has time dancing sections which supports the dance pad. The arrows move around the screen and you hit the arrow when it hits the circle. This is tied to licensed music, which is all pretty solid choices, but it's not shortened versions of these songs. They use the whole songs for these. If you are using a controller like I was, hitting the arrows to the beat, doing this so quickly for around 4 minutes is tiring on the hands. The timing is also awkward with sections with rapid arrow presses in a row that I never could figure out the correct timing for. It was tiring and frustrating, especially when it introduced button presses. Eventually it'll show you 2 colored arrows, which make a double button press. They decided to show the arrows that would be on the dance pad instead of corresponding buttons on the controller. The colors don't match the colors of the buttons either. You hit it based on where the buttons are on the controller in comparison to the arrows. It's messy and challenging to get down, especially when you're in the middle of arrow presses, which causes you to have to kinda bear claw the controller to try to hit 2 buttons at the same time. This is the sloppiest part of the game, and it's not remotely enjoyable, especially when you get stuck from progressing because you don't get a high enough percentage of hits. If I were younger, I probably would have quit right here. Another level type is racing levels, and these are fine. You usually ride around on the back of something and you move in a straight line. You dodge obstacles and sometimes pick up items on your path. It's an easy difficulty race, so you'll most likely have 0 issues getting to the end, but your interactions with the environment are fun and dodging becomes a fun obstacle course. I thought these were pretty solid, and as you get later in the game and have to collect stuff along the path, it has a nice frantic energy. These are the better playing parts of the game. A good amount of the game's levels are 2.5D side-scrolling levels. Some ask you to be stealthy, while others have you finding objects scattered around town. The stealth levels are fine, having you hide behind objects in time with fish passing by. The only thing is, it's really easy. I could swim right to the end on these levels and have fish detect me on the way, but as soon as I swam by, they lost all sight of me. If you're a long-time watcher of these reviews, you know I don't like shoehorn stealth in games, which this generation has a lot of. But here, it's okay. It's timing-based and waiting around, but it's usually extremely short. It would work well for a kid. The levels where you search around the town in 2.5D does have some fun concepts, but also has issues. It's on a 2D plane, and the map will tell you where you need to go. But the map is in 3D. And you have to use a street sign to change the direction of where you're pointed. It's a great idea, but the gameplay is just way too simple. You dash to hit enemies and you dodge objects. Your health bar in this game is huge, and usually you can just tank hits and run all the way to the end. It feels good to control with swimming having a nice flow, and pulling off dashes works. This part of the game is not broken by any means, it's just kind of bland. I could see a kid getting some kind of fun out of the simplicity, especially younger kids, but as an adult, it's way too simplistic and hard to have fun with. It lacks a challenge, making a game of moving from point A to point B, and that's it. There are some fun areas like where you have to stay in line with pufferfish that surround you, but moments like these are few and far between. The gameplay does have its moments with the Punch-Out style levels, but the bulk of it ends up being poorly done dance levels and uninteresting side-scrolling levels. Other than the dancing levels, the gameplay would be okay for a kid, and I don't think it's overtly broken by any means. Still, even as a kid, you might find this boring, and as an adult, it's an uninteresting game to play. Granted, this game's only 25 missions, and it only took me around 3 hours to beat, so it's short and not long enough to gain tedium. Its gameplay is just mostly weak overall.
Try to aim for the gaps between the buildings.
I was surprised to find the graphics in Shark Tale were pretty decent. Most of the time, these types of movie games have a hard time capturing the animation of the cartoons, but here it looks good. The water and backgrounds are well captured, the city in the ocean is full of detailed buildings and windows with doors you can enter. It's not vibrant with life, but there's more going on for a movie game than you'd expect. Fish swim all around you and it fills the screen. The fidelity is nice and it runs at 480p on the original Xbox. I'm surprised by how well the characters in the movie come through this game. Oscar looks like he does in the movie, and it's not of the same quality as a DreamWorks movie, but it's solid. The animations are stiff, but everyone's faces are expressive with animations that work well in this game. The cutscenes give a great sense of animation, and even if the story feels disjointed, the cutscenes look nice. I don't think this is a game with a visual style that will wow you. There are some muddy water areas that look dark, especially when many elements litter the screen, and it does make some gameplay messy, yet I will say that it at least captures the mood and feel of the movie, which is a positive for this game.
Are you telling me I have to sneak into a giant ship full of sharks to confirm Lucky Day's supposed to win the 4th race?
Sorry, Oscar. I said I'd dig up the kelp. I didn't say it would be easy.
Thanks, Tony.
A huge part of Shark Tale is its soundtrack. It's filled with licensed music by Inner Circle, MC Hammer, and Outkast. It's at least fun song choices, but they are a little annoying because it's all that plays during some of the main levels. It gets tedious to hear the same song repeatedly, especially when it's iconic and you've already heard it so much. There is a longer level that plays Bad Boys repeatedly, and it was rough by the end of it. It's a fun choice for a song, but it gets tiring when you hear it over and over. And some original music is used, and I'd say this is the better choice for the side-scrolling levels. It's not anything notable, but it works fine in the game. It at least makes sense to have licensed music in the dancing sections, and there are some good choices there. The voice cast from Shark Tale does not return for this game, and they tried their best to get sound-alikes. Phil LaMarr ends up playing Oscar as a cover-up for Will Smith. I really didn't hear a comparison between the voices, but Phil is good enough to make it work. They do repeat a lot of dialogue for him though. It's not the worst I've heard in a movie game, but it does get a little tiring. The other voice actors do a fine job with nothing notably bad, but you can tell that people like Scorsese, Angelina Jolie, and Robert De Niro are not here voicing the characters, but then again, it's not expected they would. Otherwise though, the sound design is a bit quiet. There were dash noises and little bubble noises, but I turned down the music so I could have some footage to show you without licensed tracks. But as you might hear, it's a barren sounding game. Other than your bubbles from swimming, it's really quiet. I wish there were more to say about it, but it feels like they use loud music to cover up the lack of sound effects. Overall, Shark Tale is better than some children's movies games, but it still is a reasonably lackluster experience. It's hard to give opinions on games like this because they were intended for people younger than me. So this is an assessment for somebody that's older, and in comparison to the rest of the Xbox library. In that aspect, Shark Tale ends up being a bore. It has some fun but repetitive music. Visually it's good, but its gameplay is more miss than hit. The only time it's fun is when you're playing Punch-Out, and it's kind of fun when you're racing, but otherwise it's just a mess. The side-scroller sections are manageable and don't do anything interesting, the dance mode feels broken, and the dodging sections are nothing special. It's a mediocre movie game that does not rise above the rest, but maybe doesn't sink quite as low either. It's not some hidden gem rising from the depths, and it's not an essential part of any collection. It works, but there's not much to remember. On my ranking list of the 91 games I've covered on the channel, Shark Tale enters in at 86. This is actually a little lower than I expected, but I think we'll see a stronger divide on really bad games as we move through the library. It's better than Hummer Badlands because it's at least trying some interesting things, but Eragon is a much more memorable experience. Shark Tale received mixed reception upon its release, but it actually fared better critically than I would have expected. The Xbox version holds a 67 on Metacritic. IGN gave it a 7 out of 10, complimenting its graphics. GameSpot gave it the same score, liking its variety and levels. Official Xbox Magazine in the holiday 2004 issue gave it a 6 out of 10, complaining about the mix of easy levels and challenging levels, but they thought kids would enjoy it. The movie released the day after the game and would fare worse than the game, with a poor reception from critics. It was a hit in theaters though, grossing $374 million at the box office on a $75 million budget. It made a splash for a little, but now I really don't see it as well remembered as some of its DreamWorks contemporaries. Even if it got an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature, I'm sure this game sold well, as evidenced by the number of times I see it pop up in Xbox game lots, and it does have a Platinum Hits release. Yet aside from nostalgia, I'm not sure it exists well in the minds of many. The user aggregate website Backlog holds it at a 1.9 average with 803 plays, and this game is wrecked in the reviews, far worse than anything I said in this review. It makes it feel like there's a lot of hate for this one, and even if I didn't outright hate it, I can understand their feelings fully. Shark Tale overall is just a weak experience. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like as it helps out the channel. Put in the comments below if you've played Shark Tale before, how you feel about it, maybe tell me about the movie, or just tell me what I should cover next. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content. And I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube channel members. Thank you so much for your support. You really help out the channel. And I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.